right, let's start off talking about something in my practice. I'm a certified financial planner, president of a company called AFM Investments, located in downtown Toms River. We've been in business for 35 years, so I've been around the block. I've been in the financial services industry for 37 years, so we've been around quite a long time, and because of our longevity, we are seeing a lot of clients now who are at the end of their life. Many of my clients have been with me for decades. They retired at 65, came to me. Most of my clients are either pre-retirement or retirement, and we've seen them age. I mean, let's face it, they've been with you 20 years. They started at 65. A lot of them are 85. And unfortunately, now they're at the end of their lives, and we're doing a lot more of what's considered to be end-of-life planning. Early in my career, I didn't do a lot of that. But because of the aging of my client base, I've been forced to become an expert in how to handle the end of people's life from a financial standpoint. But there's more to end-of-life planning than just financial. And we're going to go over what it means. End-of-life planning is planning for what you wish to happen when you die. Now that includes before you die, the years leading up to it, and post-death. All of it is end-of-life planning. And it's very complicated, and people make big mistakes at this stage of their lives. Either they're just not competent to do the planning, or they wait too long. And this is not something that you want to do when you're ill and you have a short time to live. That's not the time to be doing end-of-life planning. Most important time to do end-of-life planning is when you are the only spouse. If you're still married, end-of-life planning is not as a significant issue because the surviving spouse is going to handle the issues. Almost everything is just going to transfer to the surviving spouse. But at that time, when there's only one left, a widow or widower, that's when we really have to look at generational wealth transfer. And we're going to see something like $7 or $8 trillion transfer from one generation to the next over the next decade. And that means that this end-of-life planning is a real serious thing that we have to look at, but we have to understand what it is. And it's not just a will. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to die, so I just got to make sure my affairs are in order. I have a will and a power of attorney and my living will, and that's it. That is not end-of-life planning. That's estate planning, but it's not end-of-life planning. End-of-life planning also takes into account your long-term health care issues. Where are you going to be towards the end of your life? Are you going to be in assisted living? Are you going to have somebody come to your house and take care of you? Are you going to wind up in a nursing home? Planning for all these things is end-of-life planning. A lot of end-of-life planning is wealth preservation for the estate. We all have these horror stories where we've seen somebody, all their money they worked for their entire life gets eaten up in nursing home costs at the end of their life, and there goes everybody's inheritance. Well, there's certain planning that can be done to protect that money. We do a lot of that. Maybe we take a home and we put the deed in the children's names, and we start a 5-year look-back period so we could qualify for Medicaid at some point down the line, and at least protect that asset for your heirs. And the one thing about life and the mystery of life is we don't know when it's going to end. That's why we got to plan it in advance. Now, of course, as our health declines, that's when we really need to look at making sure our affairs are in order. And I mentioned on my show last week the mistakes that people make in estate planning. And you may want to look that episode up on the podcast. Our podcasts are at Podomatic, but they're always available at thefinancialphysician.com. Just click on the radio icon there. It'll bring you to Podomatic. We have all our shows. We got hundreds of shows there, actually. But last week's show, I talked about the mistakes in estate planning and things that I'm seeing in my practice. People don't change beneficiaries on IRA accounts. Their will is outdated. They've done mistakes in their gifting strategies with their kids. They gifted appreciated property that now is going to have capital gains taxes. So it's real important that you get really professional advice when you're looking to do your planning. So what are some of the components of end-of-life planning? Well, let's talk about healthcare and medical issues. And obviously at the end of our lives, we use more medical services than we do probably our entire lives combined. So the first thing we talk about when we're talking about end-of-life planning is, what do you want to be done to you? What do you not want to be done to you towards the end of your life? And that's where we bring in a healthcare power of attorney. Now, this is somebody we trust. This is a document, and that's the thing too. You got to understand, when you're doing your end-of-life planning, it's not just a discussion with your family, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. It's documents. You have to document what you want. And that's what a living will does. A living will state in there, do you want a feeding tube? Do you want to be intubated? Do you want to be resuscitated if you have your heart stops? And you list in that document what you want done and what you don't want done. And it's very, very important to have that. Now, most of our older people do have it. When you go into a hospital for a procedure, they usually ask you, do you have a living will? And you want to have that done. It's very, very important. And in the living will, you name the healthcare power of attorney. This is a person that's 18 or older that you trust to make healthcare decisions on your behalf when you can't make them yourself. So you take that with the living will, and that's a very, very important item to have, especially as we get older. But look, a lot of things that we're talking about here, this end-of-life planning, you could do it at 30, at least certain components of it. It's amazing how many young people don't have wills. It's amazing how many older people don't have wills. I had the son of one of my clients come in, and his father didn't have a will. So now he had to go to the court. The court had to name him administrator. He had to go and get a bond, an insurance bond, to ensure that he wouldn't defraud the estate. It's just a nightmare. And that's the thing here. If you're not prepared for your end of life, it's a nightmare for your survivors. So this is, you're doing a blessing for your family when you take care of these issues. Why is it important to have a will when you're younger? A lot of people say, Lou, I don't have any assets. I'm 30 years old. Well, what? Do you have children? That's a very precious asset you have. Very precious. Who's going to be the guardian of those children if you die? Do you want a court to name somebody? Do you want your children to be a ward of the state? Do you want them to name somebody that you would never name in your family? Very important to name somebody. Now, if you're going to name somebody as guardian for your children, I would have a discussion with them first that they want to do it. And when you come to that decision that they will do it for you, then that's the person that you're comfortable with. You'll name it in your will. And now when I say this to young people, they never even thought of it. They never even thought that a will would be a place I would name a guardian for my children. Another thing you got to think of, do you want to do any organ or tissue donation? A lot more people want to do that. Now it's relatively easy because you put it on your driver's license, but you want to think these things through. Let's talk financial and legal items. All right, this is where we start talking about wills. And a will, very simply, decides where your assets go. We want our assets to go certain places when we die, don't we? But we got to memorialize that with a document that's called a last will and testament. And this names who's going to get what. Now, you got to keep in mind when you're doing these end-of-life planning that you have to look at other things. Beneficiaries have nothing to do with a will. If you have an IRA account or a pension or an annuity or an insurance product, your will has no effect on those assets. Those assets will be bequeathed based on the beneficiary that you designate when you establish the account. You could change those things at any time. That's the great thing about wills and beneficiaries. They're not irrevocable. You could change them at any time. Now, if you're married, the standard thing is, look, my surviving spouse gets everything. Now, many of the things that we have, many of the assets we have are jointly held with our spouse anyway. And that's another thing. if your accounts are titled with somebody else's name on them with you, they're joint accounts. More often than not, the survivor owns that account, regardless of what the will says. And I see this all the time in my practice. You know, I look at somebody's will and it says, my 2 children share equally my residual estate. Okay, what is a residual estate? It's everything that doesn't have a beneficiary on the account or a joint owner. So a lot of times people will say at the end of their lives, I'm going to put my son or my daughter on my brokerage account or my checking account because it'd be more convenient. They could pay my bills, they can call the broker, liquidate stuff, and take care of business. Well, the problem with that is now you're disinheriting your other children. Because when you die, the joint tenant on the account owns it. You say, wait a second, I thought everything was going to be split amongst my kids equally. No way. No way. People make this mistake all the time. There's no such thing as putting somebody's name on an account. You're gifting them 50% of the account. And when you die, they own all of it. And I always use this story because it stuck with me for 20 years. This one story, and it's just one example of a mistake people make at the end of their life. Woman comes to me with her husband, they're in their 30s. They asked me to help settle the mother's estate. And a lot of what we do is helping people settle estates. I'm an expert at doing that. I've been executors for a number of people, and I guide them through the settlement process. But they come in and I say, okay, let me see the will. And the will says that all assets of my residual estate are to be split evenly between my son and my daughter. Okay, that makes sense. That's what most people would want. So what happens? I said, what's the assets? She goes, well, she only had 2 things. She had a $900,000 Merrill Lynch brokerage account and her home. I said, all right, let me see the statement on the Merrill Lynch brokerage account. Sure enough, it was $900,000 and change. The title on the account was the mother and the daughter. And I said, why is your name on this account? And she said, well, my mother put my name on the account a couple of years ago so I could deal with the broker and it's more convenient. Well, I said to her, well, I don't care what the will says, this money's all yours. And I think the husband almost fell off his chair. And as it turns out, the deed to the house also was in the daughter's name with the mother. So in essence, the son was entirely disinherited. Totally legal. The son could do nothing. The only thing the son could do is if he feels his sister took advantage of the mother when she was not competent to make this decision, that's the only leg he has to stand on it. But in this case, the mother was competent. And legally, there's nothing the son can do. So, he's out at least $500,000. Now, I don't know what happened thereafter. I didn't follow up with this person. Did they do the right thing? Did they give half the money to their brother? I don't know. But they don't have to. Why not do something different? You don't have to put your son or daughter's name on an account for them to be able to assist you. All you have to do is name a power of attorney. A power of attorney is just like yourself. They can call up a broker or a bank or whatever, and as power of attorney could do the same exact things they could do if they own the account with you. But just because they're power of attorney, now the account is still part of your residual estate, and your will determine how it's broken up. But so many people skip the power of attorney and just put somebody's name on the account. And there's something called a general power of attorney, and there's a durable power of attorney. Durable just means that it stays in effect when you become incompetent, which is exactly what you want. That's the reason why you have a power of attorney. But just realize that, somebody has a power of attorney, they could do anything with your money. They could gift it to themselves. They could spend it any way they wish. So it's very important that whoever you give that power of attorney to, you trust. And I'll tell you stories about people with powers of attorney that did the wrong thing. I could spend a whole show talking about that. You have to remember, a power of attorney terminates when you die. So if you want this person who you gave a power of attorney to be able to continue handle your post-death affairs, that's where you name an executor. That person would be an executor in your will. And, being an executor is a very, very important, you have a very important role in settling an estate. And it is not a glamorous thing to be an executor. A lot of times siblings fight over this. And that's another thing about end-of-life planning, is that you're doing it. Do you want your family to disintegrate, to become estranged because of fighting after you die over different things? No. But usually you should name the executor somebody who is competent with finances, somebody you trust to do the right thing. If your son can't even balance his own checkbook and keep his financial affairs in order, why would you name him as your executor? Just because he's your son? No, you want to name the person who's most competent to settle the estate. And that may be somebody outside of the family. That may be a trusted friend. That may be a professional. That may be an attorney. Now, of course, those professionals are going to get paid an executor fee to do it. But at least you know it would be competently done. It would be done in a timely fashion, that all liabilities would be taken care of. And that's what an executor does. He makes sure all your debts are paid. Make sure all your taxes are paid. If there's inheritance tax, he files the inheritance tax return. He liquidates your assets. And based on what your will says, he'll distribute those assets as you want. Sounds simple, doesn't it? But it's not. Trust me. So these documents are extremely important. Living will. Medical power of attorney. Who's that person? Who's going to be your power of attorney for financial matters? Who's going to be your executor? And who's going to be your beneficiaries? Now, once you do all these documents, somebody's got to know where those documents are. And this is where a lot of people drop the ball. They don't tell their loved ones where their documents are, and then you have to go on a hunt. And that's the worst thing you could do to your family, is make them have to do forensic accounting to try to find out where your assets are. Your loved one's going to need to know the following. Where are your insurance policies? Where is your power of attorney? Where is your living will? Where is your last will and testament? Do you have a trust? Where's that? Contact information. People that your loved one should contact. Your attorney, your estate planner, your accountant, your investment advisor. A veterinarian for your pets. Most people don't even think about that. All right. What's going to happen to your pets? Where are all your assets? If your will says that all my assets are split evenly between my two children, well, what are your assets? Where's a list of your assets? Where's the most recent statements? Where's your safe deposit box? Do you have cash hidden in a shoebox somewhere? You have gold coins that you stash somewhere. People need to know where these things are. Now, I developed, probably 20 years ago, something I call the estate letter of instruction. This is different than a will. The will doesn't really list your assets. Most wills will say my residual estate is split equally amongst my 3 children or whatever. All right, but it doesn't tell you where your assets are, what they're worth. So I developed something called an estate letter of instructions. I think it's 14 pages long. And it's a template. You fill out all the important people in your life, your accountant, their phone number, your investment advisor, information on your funeral arrangements, which we'll talk about in a second. All your debts. You list the accounts where your credit cards are and everything else. Where are your investments? I've seen so many times the children are looking in tax returns to find dividends that were claimed on a stock or a mutual fund to try to figure out where mom's money is. Or going through all her paperwork. That's a mess towards the end of her life to try to find current statements. These things could all be on one document called the State Letter of Instruction. Where are your savings? What banks do you deal with? Approximate values that you will update. Where are your tax returns? Does anybody owe you money? Say you lent a friend 10 grand. Is it written down somewhere? You pass away, what's the chances of that person coming into your estate and saying, I owe your estate 10 grand? Many people, that is going to die with you. So it's really important. Now in the digital age that we live into, what do we want done with all our digital life? Our email account. Who's going to shut it down? Is there a list of passwords? How about social media? How about photos and files you have on a computer? Where are those files located? You may have some really sentimental pictures of different events in your life that you've uploaded on a computer or some cloud source somewhere. Where is it? How about your social media accounts? Is it important to you that there's a memorial, it's memorialized with a post by somebody in your friend on Facebook? What's all the passwords to all these social media accounts? These all have to be closed down at some point. What about digital assets that you may have? How about if you have a gaming account on an online brokerage? Or now betting is legal in many states, certainly here in New Jersey and New York, right? So what if you have $1,000, $2,000 in an account at Borgata online? Nobody knows about it. What if you have cryptocurrencies? A lot of people now have exchanges where they have an account with a very detailed password. That's the only way you can get into these crypto accounts. If you don't have the password, that money dies. Do you have that written down somewhere? So you want to make a digital inventory, accounts that you have, all digital assets that you have. A lot of people don't think about this. Another thing that we need to do in our end-of-life planning is the funeral details. What do we want? Nowadays, there's lots of different ways that you could either grieve or celebrate somebody's life. Traditional funeral with a wake and a casket and all that stuff. Should you prepay it? Should you set it up in advance? Do you want a burial? You want cremation? Are you going to get a plot in advance? Or is it going to be your family during the worst time possible that have to decide all these things and run around? What do you want the mood of the funeral to be? I want certain music played. I want people to be happy about my life. Or do you want people sitting there crying and grieving? How much money do you want spent on the funeral? And do you want to prepay it? Best gift you could ever give to your family is to take some of your money and prepay your funeral. It's going to be exactly the way you want, down to the casket. And when you do pass, your family has this already set up. I'll tell you, people who do this, you're giving such a gift to your family. Who wants to make these decisions? I've had to do it for my parents. And that's the last thing you want to do. The day my father died, I was in the funeral home. When I should have been home with my wife, grieving the loss of my father. No, I'm there trying to make these financial arrangements, make these decisions on caskets and everything else. So this is very important to do this stuff. And now there's one more thing that we need to do. And that is have a family discussion. And this is really touchy for a lot of people. Sit down. You don't do it when you're 70 years old. You don't have to do it then. But as you see the finish line coming closer and closer, you want to sit down with your family and go over all these things. Go over what's in your will. If you're not given equitable distribution, and a lot of parents don't do equitable distribution amongst their children. Well, my one son's a doctor, or a lawyer, or a businessman, and he does just fine. He doesn't need my money. But my daughter, her and her husband struggle. They got 3 kids. They haven't put anything away for retirement or for college. Maybe I want the majority of my money to go to that child and not the successful one. Well, you better have that discussion. Because I say, I've authored a book. It's called The Financial Physician: How to Cure Your Money Problems and Boost Your Financial Health. I wrote it in 2010. It's available free to anybody who wants to get it. Just go to thefinancialphysician.com. You could download the PDF of the book, free of charge. And in it, I talk about these issues, and I say the will is a terrible place to keep secrets. That is not the place to keep secrets. You want to discuss these things with your family because, like I said earlier, do you want your family to dissolve, to have bad blood after you die? I think that's the last thing any of us would want, right? Don't let surprises jump out on the will. Discuss with all your children who you chose as the executor and why. If it's not equal distribution, explain why. It'd be a lot easier on that person when they hear it from you versus hearing from it when the will's read. And by the way, the letter of instruction I told you about before, I've had children of my clients come to me and say this thing was invaluable to us. It made our lives so much easier. And it's a gift you give your survivors. Ease of settlement of your affairs. Very important. It makes their life so much easier. Now, is it a legal document? No, it's not. I also have a page on there, personal property designation. It's not the money that families fight over in a will. It's dad's golf clubs. It's mom's wedding ring. It's that picture that was hanging over the fireplace when we were growing up. Trust me on this. This is what the family fights over. And many people don't put in their will these individual designations. You don't list everything you own. You're not going to say my golf clubs go to my son John. You're not going to do that in the will. But in this letter of instruction, you have a list of all these personal items that you have. Who you're giving it to and why. It's written down. Mom wanted me to have her wedding ring. It's right here on her list. She signed it. And there's even on the last page, notes to your loved one. Maybe you have a little couple of sentences or paragraph you want to write to each one of your children. How beautiful is that to have that when your parent passes? So end-of-life planning, like I said, in my practice, I'm seeing more and more of it. It's so important. I see people who do it right, usually with my assistance, and I see people who do it wrong or don't do it at all. And boy, the ease of settling an estate and dealing with end-of-life issues are black and white for those who plan and those who don't. Very, very important. All right, let's take a break. The phone number here is 732-237-9626, 732-237-9626. We take any question, any comment on any money matter right here on The Financial Physician. My name is Lou Scatigna. Don't go away.